The night shift nurse thought he was just a lonely patient. Please rate this story from 1 to 10. Tell us where you are watching from and share if you have a similar experience. Subscribe for new stories every day. Let's begin. It was 11:30 at night when Rachel finally sat down. Her feet ached, and her lower back throbbed with each breath. She had been on her feet for 14 hours straight. The small community hospital where she worked was always understaffed. Tonight had been particularly brutal. Rachel pulled off her sneakers and massaged her swollen ankles. The break room was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. She closed her eyes for just a moment. Sleep pulled at her like a heavy blanket.
Just 10 minutes. Then I'll check on Mr. Thompson again.
But the door swung open before she could rest. Jessica, her friend and fellow nurse, rushed in. Her face was flushed and worried. Jessica told her they had a new patient in room 12. He was an elderly man brought in from a retirement home. No family had come with him. He was barely conscious, and his vitals were extremely weak. Dr. Martinez wanted Rachel to take the overnight shift monitoring him.
Of course he does.
Rachel stood up with a groan. Her body protested, but she ignored it. She grabbed her shoes and followed Jessica down the dimly lit hallway. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Room 12 was at the end of the corridor. When Rachel entered, she saw an old man lying in the bed. He was thin, almost skeletal. His skin had a grayish tone that made her heart sink. His breathing was shallow and labored. An oxygen tube rested under his nose. Rachel approached the bed slowly. She checked his chart at the foot of the bed. His name was Henry Sullivan, 87 years old. Advanced heart failure and pneumonia, heart. Jessica whispered that the retirement home staff said he had no visitors in over 2 years. No emergency contacts were listed. He was completely alone in the world. Rachel felt a deep sadness settle in her chest.
Thank you, Jess. I'll take it from here.
Jessica left quietly and closed the door behind her. Rachel pulled up a chair next to Henry's bed. She took his cold hand in hers. His fingers were bony, and his skin felt like paper.
Hello, Mr. Sullivan. My name is Rachel. I'm going to take care of you tonight.
Henry's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. His lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. Rachel squeezed his hand gently. She adjusted his blanket and checked his IV line. The hours passed slowly. Rachel stayed by his side the entire time. She moistened his lips with a sponge. She repositioned him carefully to prevent bed sores. She talked to him, even though he couldn't respond.
You're doing great, Mr. Sullivan. Just rest now. I'm right here.
Around 3 in the morning, Henry's eyes opened. They were a pale blue color, and surprisingly clear. He looked at Rachel with confusion at first. Then something like recognition flickered across his face.
Who are you?
I'm Rachel. I'm your nurse.
Rachel.
He said her name like he was testing it. His voice was barely a whisper. It scratched and cracked with each word.
Where am I?
You're at St. Mary's Hospital. You were brought here from your residence. You have pneumonia, and your heart needs rest.
Henry closed his eyes again. A single tear rolled down his weathered cheek. Rachel felt her throat tighten.
No one came.
I'm here. You're not alone.
Henry's grip on her hand strengthened slightly. It was the smallest gesture, but it meant everything. Rachel stayed with him through the night. She dozed in her chair, but woke at every sound he made. When morning came, Dr. Martinez arrived for rounds. He examined Henry and shook his head grimly. He told Rachel that Henry's prognosis was poor. He had days at most. They would keep him comfortable. Jessica came by with breakfast for Rachel. She set down a tray with lukewarm coffee and a stale muffin. She asked Rachel if she wanted to switch patients. Someone else could handle the overnight death watch.
No. I'll stay with him.
Jessica looked at her with concern but didn't argue. She knew Rachel had a soft heart. She also knew Rachel could barely afford her rent. Taking extra shifts for a dying patient with no family wouldn't pay better. But Rachel never thought about money when it came to her patients. Over the next few days, Rachel became Henry's constant companion. She worked double shifts to stay with him. She brought him his meals even though he could barely eat. She read to him from old magazines she found in the waiting room. She played soft music from her phone. Henry began to talk more. His voice remained weak, but his mind was sharp. He told Rachel about his life. He had built a pharmaceutical company from nothing. He had worked 70-hour weeks for 40 years. He had become wealthy beyond imagination. But he had lost his wife to cancer 30 years ago. His only son died in a car accident 15 years later. His grandson David was the only family he had left. But they had drifted apart years ago.
I pushed him away.
Henry said this with such sadness that Rachel had to look away. She wiped her eyes quickly.
I was too focused on business, too angry at the world. David tried to reach out. I shut him down every time.
It's not too late. We could call him.
No. He wouldn't come. I don't deserve his forgiveness.
Rachel wanted to argue, but she could see the pain in Henry's eyes. Some wounds ran too deep. Instead, she just held his hand.
Then I'll be here. You won't be alone.
Henry looked at her with something like wonder. His eyes filled with tears.
Why? You'd even know me.
Because everyone deserves kindness. Especially at the end.
That moment changed something between them. Henry stopped being just a patient. Rachel stopped being just a nurse. They became friends in those quiet hospital hours. Henry told her about his childhood on a farm, about his dreams of becoming a doctor, about how he fell in love with his wife Margaret at a county fair, about the joy of holding his son for the first time, about the crushing grief of losing them both. Rachel told him about her own struggles, about growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs, about nursing school and the mountains of student debt, about her tiny apartment that barely had heat in winter, about her dream of opening a free clinic someday.
You're a good person, Rachel. The world needs more people like you.
I'm just doing my job.
No, but you're doing much more than that.
On the 5th night, Henry's condition worsened. His breathing became more labored. His heart rate dropped dangerously low. Dr. Martinez increased his morphine to keep him comfortable. He told Rachel it would be tonight. Rachel called Jessica and asked her to cover her other patients. She wasn't leaving Henry's side. Jessica agreed without hesitation. She brought Rachel a blanket and a pillow. Rachel dimmed the lights in the room. She pulled her chair as close to the bed as possible. She held Henry's hand between both of hers. His skin was cold now. His breathing had that distinctive rattle.
I'm here, Mr. Sullivan. You're not alone.
Henry's eyes opened one last time. They found Rachel's face. A small smile crossed his lips.
Thank you. For everything.
His voice was so soft Rachel almost missed it. Tears streamed down her face.
It was my honor.
Henry took 3 more breaths, each one longer than the last. Then he was still. The monitor beside the bed began its steady alarm. Rachel reached up and silenced it. She sat there for a long time holding his hand. She said a quiet prayer even though she wasn't particularly religious. She felt like Henry deserved that. Finally, she stood and called for Dr. Martinez. The doctor came and pronounced Henry dead at 2:17 in the morning. He put a hand on Rachel's shoulder. He told her she had done good work. Rachel nodded but couldn't speak. She helped prepare Henry's body with quiet dignity. She combed his white hair. She straightened his hospital gown. She covered him with a clean white sheet. Then she left the room and went to the break room. Rachel sat in the dark and cried. She had lost patients before. It was part of the job. But Henry had been different. She had connected with him in a way she couldn't quite explain. Jessica found her there an hour later. She sat down beside Rachel and put an arm around her shoulders. She didn't say anything. She just let Rachel cry. The next morning, Rachel tried to find information about Henry's funeral. She wanted to attend if there would be one. But the hospital administrator told her there was no service planned. Henry would be cremated. There was no family to claim him. Rachel felt a deep emptiness. Henry had lived 87 years. He had built an empire. And yet, he would leave this world without anyone to say goodbye. It felt profoundly wrong. 3 weeks passed. Rachel threw herself into work. She picked up extra shifts to distract herself. Her apartment was cold because she couldn't afford to fix the heater. She ate instant noodles, most nights. Her car had broken down, and she was taking the bus. But she was managing. She always managed somehow. That was what she told herself every morning. Then one Thursday afternoon, Rachel received a call at work. The hospital receptionist said there was a woman asking for her. A lawyer named Margaret Chen. Rachel had no idea who that was. She went to the hospital lobby confused. A sharply dressed woman in her 50s stood waiting. She carried a leather briefcase and wore expensive jewelry. She smiled when she saw Rachel. Margaret introduced herself as Henry Sullivan's attorney. She said she had been trying to reach Rachel for 2 weeks. The hospital had finally given her Rachel's work schedule. She needed to speak with Rachel about Henry's estate.
His estate? I don't understand.
Margaret suggested they talk somewhere private. Rachel led her to a small conference room the hospital used for family meetings. They sat across from each other at a cheap folding table. Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out several documents. She explained that Henry Sullivan had been the founder and majority shareholder of Sullivan Pharmaceuticals. It was one of the largest drug companies in the country. Henry's net worth at the time of his death was approximately $800 million. Rachel's mouth fell open. She had known Henry was wealthy, but she had no idea about the scale. $800 million was incomprehensible to her. Margaret continued. Henry had updated his will 2 days before he died. He had called Margaret to his hospital room. He had been lucid and determined. He had made very specific changes.
Why are you telling me this?
Margaret smiled gently. She slid a document across the table. Margaret explained that Henry had left Rachel $5 million. He had also established a trust fund to support Rachel's dream of opening a free clinic. The trust was worth an additional $3 million. There were specific instructions for how the money should be used. Rachel stared at the papers. The words blurred together. $5 million. $3 million for a clinic. $8 million total.
This can't be real.
Margaret assured her it was completely real and legally binding. Henry had been very clear about his wishes. He had told Margaret that Rachel had shown him more kindness in 5 days than he had experienced in 5 years. He wanted to ensure she would never struggle again. Rachel's hands shook as she held the documents. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She couldn't process what she was hearing. It felt like a dream.
I was just doing my job. I was just being human.
Margaret reached across the table and squeezed Rachel's hand. Margaret told her that was exactly why Henry chose her. Because Rachel didn't see him as a rich man or a business titan. She saw him as a person who needed care and compassion. That was worth more than any amount of money. They talked for another hour. Margaret explained the legal process. There would be paperwork and meetings. The money would be transferred within 6 weeks. She gave Rachel her business card and told her to call with any questions. After Margaret left, Rachel sat alone in the conference room. She read through the documents 3 more times. Each time it felt more real and more overwhelming. Her life had just changed completely. But Rachel didn't feel the joy she thought she would. Instead, she felt a deep ache. She would have given back every penny to have one more conversation with Henry. To tell him that she cared about him. To tell him that he mattered. She folded the papers carefully and put them in her bag. Then she went back to work. She still had 6 hours left on her shift. Patients still needed care. Life went on. Word spread quickly through the hospital. Within days, everyone knew about Rachel's inheritance. Reactions were mixed. Some nurses congratulated her. Others whispered behind her back. Jessica was genuinely happy for her. She hugged Rachel and told her it was well deserved. She said Rachel should quit this terrible job and enjoy her money.
I can't just quit. People depend on me.
But the whispers were harder to ignore. Some staff members suggested Rachel had manipulated a dying old man. That she had taken advantage of his loneliness. That she was a gold digger disguised as a saint. Dr. Martinez called Rachel into his office. He told her the hospital administrators were concerned about the situation. They worried about the appearance of impropriety. He suggested Rachel take a leave of absence while things settled down. Rachel felt humiliated. She had done nothing wrong. She had cared for a patient who had no one else. Now she was being punished for showing basic human decency.
Am I being fired?
Dr. Martinez assured her she wasn't being fired, but a temporary break might be best for everyone. Rachel saw through the corporate speak. They wanted her gone. She cleaned out her locker that afternoon. Jessica helped her carry her things to the parking lot. She told Rachel to hold her head high. She had nothing to be ashamed of.
Then why do I feel so terrible?
Jessica hugged her tight. She said Rachel should call her anytime. She watched as Rachel got on the bus with her box of belongings. The bus ride home felt endless. Rachel stared out the window at the gray city streets. She thought about Henry, about his lonely life and lonely death, about the cruel irony of wealth without love. When she got home to her tiny apartment, she set the box down. She looked around at her shabby furniture and peeling wallpaper. In 6 weeks, this would all change. She could afford a nice place. She could pay off her debts. She could start her clinic. But the excitement she should have felt was buried under grief and confusion. Rachel sat on her lumpy couch and cried. She cried for Henry. She cried for herself. She cried for the unfairness of a world that judged kindness as manipulation. 2 weeks later, Margaret called. She said the funeral home had Henry's ashes ready. No one had claimed them. She asked if Rachel would like to take them. Rachel agreed immediately. She went to the funeral home the next day. They gave her a simple wooden box with Henry's name, engraved on a small brass plate. She held it carefully as she left. Rachel decided to scatter Henry's ashes in the park he had mentioned. He had told her about walking there with his wife when they were young. It was a small park near the old downtown district. Rachel took the bus there on a sunny Saturday morning. The park was quiet. A few joggers passed by. Some children played on the swings. Rachel found a secluded spot under a large oak tree. She opened the wooden box. She said a few words. She thanked Henry for his generosity. She promised to use his gift to help others. She told him she hoped he was at peace. Then she scattered his ashes among the fallen leaves. When she finished, she sat under the tree for a long time. The sun filtered through the branches above. Birds sang in the distance. It was peaceful. Rachel was about to leave when she noticed someone watching her. A man stood near the park entrance. He was tall and well-dressed. He looked to be in his mid-30s. His expression was unreadable. The man walked toward her slowly. His hands were in his pockets. He stopped a few feet away from the oak tree. He looked at the ashes scattered on the ground. When he spoke, his voice was tight with emotion. The man introduced himself as David Sullivan, Henry's grandson. Rachel's heart stopped. She stood up quickly, almost dropping the empty wooden box.
I didn't know anyone would be here. I'm so sorry. I should have tried to find you.
Why would you try to find me?
His tone was cold. His blue eyes were hard. They reminded Rachel of Henry's eyes, but without the warmth.
Because you're his family. You should have been the one to do this.
Family.
David laughed bitterly. He looked away from Rachel toward the scattered ashes.
I haven't spoken to my grandfather in 3 years. He made it very clear he didn't want me in his life.
That's not true. He talked about you. He regretted pushing you away.
Is that what he told you?
David's voice dripped with skepticism. He took a step closer to Rachel. She could see anger burning behind his eyes.
How convenient that he told you all of this. How convenient that he changed his will right before he died.
Rachel felt like she had been slapped. She understood immediately what David was implying.
I didn't ask for anything. I didn't even know he was wealthy until after he died.
Right. You just happened to be incredibly kind to a dying billionaire. And you just happened to inherit millions.
Rachel's face flushed with anger. She had been called a gold digger before, but hearing it from Henry's grandson hurt more than she expected.
I cared about him. He was alone and dying. I stayed with him because it was the right thing to do.
How noble.
David's sarcasm was cutting. He crossed his arms over his chest. He looked Rachel up and down with obvious disdain.
Let me guess. You're going to tell me you're a saint. That you want nothing from his money. That you're going to give it all away.
I'm going to use it to open a free clinic. That's what he wanted.
Course you are.
Rachel's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to scream at him. to make him understand. But she could see he had already made up his mind about her.
Believe what you want. I don't need to defend myself to you.
She moved to walk past him. David caught her arm. His grip was firm but not painful. Rachel looked up at him defiantly.
I'm going to contest the will. I'm going to prove you manipulated him.
Do whatever you need to do.
She pulled her arm free and walked away. Her whole body shook with anger and hurt. Tears streamed down her face, but she refused to look back. David watched her go. His jaw was tight. His fists clenched at his sides. He looked down at his grandfather's ashes scattered on the ground. For the first time in years, he felt something crack inside his chest. Rachel took the bus home in a daze. She couldn't stop replaying the confrontation. David's cold eyes. His accusations. His certainty that she was a con artist. When she got home, she called Margaret. She told her about the encounter. Margaret sighed heavily. Margaret explained that David had already filed paperwork to contest the will. He was claiming undue influence. It would mean months of legal battles, depositions and court appearances. The money would be frozen until everything was resolved.
Can he win?
Margaret said it was unlikely. Henry's will was ironclad. He had been evaluated by 2 doctors, who confirmed he was mentally competent. But the process would be stressful and public. Rachel felt exhausted. All she had done was show kindness to a dying man. Now her life was turning into a nightmare.
Maybe I should just give it back. Tell David he can have everything.
Margaret told her firmly that she couldn't do that. It would dishonor Henry's wishes. He had chosen Rachel for a reason. She needed to see this through. After the call ended, Rachel sat in the dark. Her apartment felt smaller than ever. The walls seemed to press in around her. She thought about Henry's face in those final moments. His gratitude and peace. She wouldn't let David take that away. Not from Henry, and not from herself. If he wanted a fight, she would give him one. The next morning, Rachel received a thick envelope in the mail. It was from David's legal team. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside were pages of accusations and demands. They claimed she had isolated Henry from his family, that she had poisoned his mind against David, that she had exploited a vulnerable elderly man for financial gain. Every sentence felt like a knife. Rachel wanted to throw the papers across the room. Instead, she read every word carefully. Then she called Margaret and scheduled a meeting. If David wanted war, she would be ready. Over the next few weeks, Rachel's life became consumed by legal preparation. She met with Margaret almost daily. They reviewed hospital records and witness statements. They documented every interaction Rachel had with Henry. Jessica agreed to testify on Rachel's behalf. So did several other nurses who had witnessed Rachel's dedication. Even Dr. Martinez provided a statement supporting her character. But the media had caught wind of the story. Local news outlets ran pieces about the nurse who inherited millions. Some portrayed her sympathetically. Others painted her as a cunning manipulator. Rachel stopped reading the articles. She stopped going to her favorite coffee shop because people stared. She stayed in her apartment as much as possible. The walls that had felt too small now felt like a necessary fortress. Margaret called one evening with news. David had agreed to a meeting. His lawyers wanted to try mediation before going to trial. Rachel agreed reluctantly. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at Margaret's office. Rachel barely slept the night before. She changed clothes 3 times trying to find something appropriate. She finally settled on a simple blue dress. When she arrived at the law firm, her stomach was in knots. Margaret met her in the lobby. She looked professional and confident. She told Rachel to stay calm and let her do most of the talking. They entered a large conference room. David was already there with 2 lawyers. He wore a dark suit, and his expression was carefully neutral. When his eyes met Rachel's, she saw a flicker of something. Uncertainty, maybe. Or doubt. They sat on opposite sides of a long table. The mediation began. David's lead attorney was a sharp woman named Victoria Hartley. She laid out their case methodically. Victoria argued that Rachel had inserted herself into Henry's life during his most vulnerable moment, that she had taken advantage of his isolation and grief. That the will change was suspicious in its timing. She presented it all as indisputable fact. Margaret countered each point calmly. She presented hospital logs showing Rachel had simply been assigned to Henry's care. She showed testimony from staff confirming Rachel's character. She played a recording of Henry speaking with his doctor about changing his will. In the recording, Henry's voice was weak but determined. He said Rachel had restored his faith in human goodness, that she had cared for him without any expectation of reward, that he wanted to ensure she could continue helping others. The room fell silent after the recording ended. Rachel saw David's jaw tighten. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair.
He never said those things to me.
His voice cracked slightly. Victoria put a hand on his arm to quiet him. But Rachel could see the pain in his eyes now. This wasn't really about the money. It was about his grandfather's love.
He wanted to.
Everyone turned to look at Rachel. Margaret gave her a warning look, but Rachel continued anyway.
He wanted to call you. I offered to dial your number. He refused. He said he had hurt you too much, that he didn't deserve your forgiveness.
David's face had gone pale. His lawyers shifted uncomfortably.
He talked about you all the time? About your childhood? About teaching you to fish? About how proud he was when you graduated from business school?
Tears welled up in David's eyes. He blinked them back furiously.
He died full of regret. Not about his business or his money. About losing you.
The silence in the room was heavy. Victoria started to speak, but David held up his hand. He stood abruptly and walked to the window. His back was to everyone.
I need a moment.
The lawyers exchanged glances. Margaret nodded and suggested a short break. Everyone filed out except Rachel and David. She stayed in her seat, uncertain of what to do. David stood at the window for a long time. His shoulders were tense. Finally, he spoke without turning around.
Did he really say those things?
Every word.
Why should I believe you?
Because I have no reason to lie.
David turned to face her. His eyes were red. His usual cold mask had cracked.
He threw me out of his house 3 years ago. I tried to talk to him about selling the company, about him finally retiring. He said I was ungrateful, that I didn't understand sacrifice.
Rachel listened without interrupting.
We screamed at each other. Horrible things. I said I wished he had died instead of my father.
David's voice broke completely. He covered his face with his hands.
That was the last thing I ever said to him.
Rachel stood and walked over to him. She didn't touch him, but she stood close.
He forgave you. He told me people say terrible things when they're hurt, that you were just grieving your father, that he had failed you by pushing you away.
He said that.
Yes.
David looked at her with desperate hope, searching her face for any sign of deception. But Rachel's eyes were clear and honest. David sank into a chair. He put his head in his hands. His whole body shook with silent sobs. Rachel sat down next to him. She didn't say anything. She just let him cry. When the lawyers returned, they found David and Rachel sitting quietly. The hostile energy from earlier had completely dissipated. David looked exhausted but calmer.
I'm dropping the case.
Victoria started to protest. David silenced her with a look.
My grandfather wanted Rachel to have that money. I'm not going to fight his wishes anymore.
Margaret looked at Rachel questioningly. Rachel nodded slowly. It was over. The meeting ended quickly after that. Paperwork was signed. Agreements were made. Within 30 minutes, everyone was packing up to leave. Rachel gathered her things. She was almost to the door when David called her name. She turned back.
Thank you for taking care of him, for being there when I wasn't.
He loved you very much. I hope you know that.
David nodded. He seemed like he wanted to say more. But instead, he just extended his hand. Rachel shook it. His grip was warm and strong. She left the building feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The legal battle was over. Henry's wishes would be honored. She could finally move forward. But as she walked to the bus stop, she couldn't stop thinking about David, about the pain in his eyes, about the regret that matched Henry's so perfectly. Two people who had loved each other, but had let pride destroy their relationship. It made her think about her own mother. They had fought before her mother died. Stupid arguments about Rachel's career choice. Her mother had wanted her to be a doctor, not a nurse. They hadn't spoken for 6 months. Then her mother had a stroke. She died before Rachel could apologize. That regret lived inside Rachel like a stone. She saw the same weight in David's eyes. 3 weeks passed. The money was finally transferred to Rachel's accounts. $5 million appeared as if by magic. The trust for the clinic was established. Rachel quit her job at the hospital officially. Jessica threw her a small goodbye party. They ate grocery store cake in the break room. It was bittersweet. Rachel found a new apartment in a better neighborhood. It had heat and windows that actually closed. She bought herself a used car. Nothing fancy, but it was reliable. She started researching locations for the free clinic. Margaret helped her set up meetings with contractors and medical supply companies. The dream was actually becoming real. But Rachel felt restless. Accomplishing her goals should have made her happy. Instead, she felt hollow. She missed Henry. She missed having purpose. One Saturday afternoon, she was at a coffee shop reviewing clinic floor plans. Someone sat down across from her. She looked up and was shocked to see David.
I hope I'm not intruding.
How did you find me?
I called Margaret. I told her I needed to talk to you. She gave me your number, but you didn't answer. So she told me you came here most Saturdays.
Rachel wasn't sure how to feel about that. But David looked nervous, less polished than before. He wore jeans and a simple shirt.
What do you need?
To apologize. Properly this time.
He pulled out a thick envelope from his bag. He set it on the table between them.
These are letters. My grandfather wrote to me over the years. He never sent them. His assistant found them in his desk after he died.
Rachel stared at the envelope. She could see David's name written in shaky handwriting on the top letter.
I read them all last night. Every single one. He wrote about his regrets, his mistakes, his hope that someday we would reconcile.
David's voice was thick with emotion.
In the last letter, he wrote about you, about how you made him feel human again, about how your kindness reminded him of my grandmother.
Tears rolled down David's cheeks. He didn't wipe them away.
You gave him peace in his final days. You gave him something I couldn't. I'm sorry for accusing you, for making everything so much harder.
You were hurting.
That's no excuse.
Rachel reached across the table. She put her hand over his.
I forgive you.
David looked at her hand on his. Then, up at her face. Something shifted in his expression. Something vulnerable and open.
Can I ask you something?
Of course.
Would you tell me about him? About his last days? About what he said?
Rachel smiled gently.
I would love to.
They sat in that coffee shop for hours. Rachel told David everything. Every conversation she and Henry had shared. Every laugh and every tear. Every moment of connection. David listened like he was trying to memorize every word. When Rachel finished, he was quiet for a long time.
Thank you. Truly.
He was a good man. He just got lost along the way. But at the end, he found his way back.
Before David left, he asked if he could see Rachel again. Maybe help with the clinic project. He said he owed it to his grandfather's memory.
I'd like that.
They exchanged numbers. As David walked away, Rachel felt something unexpected. A flutter of warmth in her chest. She pushed it aside. David was Henry's grandson. This was about honoring Henry's legacy. Nothing more. But as the days turned into weeks, Rachel and David saw each other regularly. They met to discuss the clinic, to review architectural plans, to interview potential staff. Slowly, they became friends. David was nothing like the cold, angry man from their first meeting. He was thoughtful and funny. He told terrible jokes that made Rachel laugh despite herself. He also shared stories about his life, about growing up in his grandfather's shadow, about the pressure to take over the company, about his own failed relationships.
I was engaged once. Her name was Victoria.
Rachel's eyebrows rose.
Your lawyer, Victoria.
Different Victoria. But yes, she was also a lawyer. We were together for 4 years.
David stirred his coffee absently.
She wanted the lifestyle more than she wanted me. When I suggested stepping back from the company, she left.
I'm sorry.
Don't be. It taught me what really matters.
He looked at Rachel when he said this. Their eyes held for a moment too long. Rachel felt her cheeks warm. She looked away quickly. Jessica noticed the change in Rachel. They met for lunch one day, and Jessica interrogated her. She wanted to know everything about David. Jessica said Rachel was obviously falling for him. Rachel denied it vehemently. But even as she protested, she knew Jessica was right. She was developing feelings for David Sullivan, Henry's grandson, the man who had accused her of being a gold digger. It was complicated and messy, exactly the kind of thing Rachel usually avoided. But she couldn't help it. When David smiled, her heart raced. When they worked side by side, she felt content. When they said goodbye, she already looked forward to seeing him again. The clinic construction began in early spring. Rachel and David attended the groundbreaking ceremony together. They posed for photos with shovels and hard hats. It felt surreal. After the ceremony, they walked through the construction site. David pointed out where the waiting room would be, where the examination rooms would go. His enthusiasm matched Rachel's own.
My grandfather would have loved this.
I think about that every day.
They stopped in what would become the main entrance. Spring sunshine poured through the unfinished walls. Dust motes danced in the light.
Rachel.
His voice had changed, become softer. Rachel turned to face him.
I need to tell you something.
Rachel's heart pounded. She wasn't sure she was ready for this conversation, but she nodded.
These past few months have meant everything to me. Not just the clinic. Spending time with you. Getting to know you.
He took a step closer.
You're unlike anyone I've ever met. You're kind and strong and completely genuine. You make me want to be a better person.
David.
I know this is complicated. I know we met under terrible circumstances. But I can't ignore how I feel anymore.
Rachel's breath caught. David reached out and gently touched her face.
I'm falling in love with you, Rachel.
The words hung in the air between them. Rachel felt tears spring to her eyes. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming emotion.
I'm falling in love with you too.
David's face broke into the most genuine smile she had ever seen. He pulled her into his arms. They stood there in the unfinished clinic holding each other. It felt right. It felt like Henry had orchestrated this somehow, bringing them together through his final act of kindness. Two broken people finding healing in each other. When they finally pulled apart, David was grinning.
So what do we do now?
We take it slow. We build this clinic. We honor Henry's memory. And we see where this goes.
I can work with that.
He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a promise of new beginnings. The news of their relationship spread faster than Rachel expected. Someone had photographed them at the groundbreaking ceremony. The way David looked at her was obvious, even in a still image. Local news picked up the story within days. The headlines were brutal. Nurse inherits millions, then dates the grandson. Some called it a fairy tale romance. Others called it calculated manipulation. The comment sections were vicious. Rachel stopped reading after the first day, but she couldn't escape it completely. People recognized her on the street. Some congratulated her. Others gave her looks of pure disgust. David was furious about the media attention. He wanted to issue a statement defending Rachel. She convinced him it would only make things worse.
People will believe what they want to believe. We know the truth. That's what matters.
They're calling you terrible things.
I've been called worse.
But the scrutiny wore on her. Rachel had always been a private person. Now strangers felt entitled to judge her most personal choices. It made her want to hide. David tried to shield her as much as possible. He took her to quiet restaurants where they wouldn't be recognized. They spent evenings at his apartment instead of going out. Slowly, they carved out a private world together. 3 months into their relationship, David invited Rachel to dinner at his place. He said he was cooking. Rachel was skeptical.
You can cook.
I can follow a recipe. That counts.
When Rachel arrived, she found David's kitchen in chaos. Flour covered the counters. 3 pots were boiling over simultaneously. Smoke was coming from the oven. David stood in the middle of it all looking panicked. He wore an apron that said, "Kiss the cook." Rachel couldn't help but laugh.
What happened here?
I was making pasta from scratch. And chicken. And some kind of sauce. I think I started too many things at once.
Rachel rolled up her sleeves. She turned off 2 burners and opened the oven. The chicken inside was definitely overcooked. She looked at David's hopeful face.
How about we order pizza?
Is it that bad?
Rachel held up a piece of pasta. It was hard as a rock. David sighed.
I really wanted to impress you.
You already do. Just not with your cooking skills.
They ordered pizza and ate it on his couch. David told her about his first attempt at cooking as a child. He had tried to make his father breakfast. He had somehow started a small fire. Rachel laughed until her sides hurt. Moments like these made everything else bearable. The media scrutiny faded into background noise. What mattered was this connection, this joy. But their peace was shattered 2 weeks later. David received an urgent call from Thomas Harrington. Thomas was the current CEO of Sullivan Pharmaceuticals. He had taken over after Henry's death. Thomas demanded an immediate meeting. There was a crisis at the company. David asked Rachel to come with him. She was nervous, but agreed. They arrived at Sullivan Pharmaceuticals headquarters the next morning. The building was sleek glass and steel. It screamed wealth and power. Rachel felt completely out of place. Thomas met them in a conference room. He was a stern man in his 60s with silver hair. 2 other board members were present. The atmosphere was tense. Thomas got straight to business. He explained that a major scandal had emerged. One of their best-selling drugs had serious undisclosed side effects. Patients were getting sick. Lawsuits were already being filed. The board had discovered that Henry had known him about the problems. He had buried the research years ago. Now, it was coming to light. The company's reputation was in free fall.
My grandfather knew.
Thomas nodded grimly. He showed them internal documents with Henry's signature. Emails where Henry had ordered the research team to downplay the risks. It was damning evidence. Thomas said they needed David to make a public statement. As Henry's grandson and heir, he needed to distance himself from these decisions. To condemn what Henry had done. To save the company's image.
You want me to throw my grandfather under the bus?
Thomas said it bluntly. Yes, that was exactly what they needed. Rachel watched David's face. She could see him struggling. His grandfather had done something terrible, but he was still his grandfather. Still the man David was trying to forgive and remember fondly. The board members pressured him. They said the company employed 15,000 people. Their livelihoods depended on Sullivan Pharmaceuticals surviving this. If David didn't help, they might lose everything.
I need time to think.
Thomas gave him 48 hours. Then they would move forward with or without David's cooperation. The meeting ended coldly. In the car, Rachel held David's hand. He stared straight ahead. His jaw was tight.
What are you going to do?
I don't know.
They drove in silence. When they got back to David's apartment, he poured himself a drink. Then, another. Rachel had never seen him like this.
He wasn't perfect. I knew that. But this...
David's voice cracked.
People got hurt because he wanted to protect his profits. How do I defend that?
You don't have to defend it.
But if I condemn him publicly, it erases everything else. All the good he did. His final attempt at redemption.
Rachel sat beside him. She took the glass from his hand.
People are complicated. Your grandfather did something terrible, but he also tried to make amends at the end. Both things can be true.
The board wants me to make him a villain.
Then don't. Tell the truth. Acknowledge what he did wrong. Take responsibility for fixing it. but don't erase who he was trying to become.
David looked at her. His eyes were red.
You're remarkable. You know that.
I just know that people deserve nuance, even when they mess up.
David pulled her close. They sat like that for a long time. 2 days later, David held a press conference. Rachel watched from the audience. Cameras flashed as David took the podium. He spoke clearly and honestly. He acknowledged what his grandfather had done. He called it unacceptable and wrong. He announced that Sullivan Pharmaceuticals would settle all lawsuits fairly. They would fund medical treatment for affected patients. But he also spoke about Henry's final months, about his regret and his attempt to do better, about the clinic he had funded, about second chances and redemption. The media response was mixed. Some praised David's honesty. Others said he was making excuses. But the company stock stabilized. The board breathed easier. Thomas called David afterward. He thanked him grudgingly. He said David had saved the company. David didn't feel victorious. He just felt tired. But the crisis took a toll on his relationship with Rachel. David became consumed with fixing his grandfather's mistakes. He worked 18-hour days. He barely slept. He canceled dates without explanation. Rachel tried to be understanding. She focused on the clinic construction. It was progressing well. The walls were up. The roof was on. They were ahead of schedule. But she missed David. When they did see each other, he was distracted, exhausted. He would fall asleep on her couch mid-conversation. Jessica told Rachel she needed to talk to him, to tell him how she felt. But Rachel kept putting it off. She didn't want to add to his stress. Then, one evening, David didn't show up for dinner. He had promised he would be there. Rachel waited at the restaurant for an hour. She called him 3 times. No answer. She finally went home angry and hurt. At midnight, David called. His voice was slurred with exhaustion.
I'm so sorry. I fell asleep at my desk.
You could have texted me.
You're right. I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you.
But he didn't. The pattern continued. Missed calls. Canceled plans. Broken promises. Rachel felt herself pulling away emotionally. She had been through this before. Men who were too busy for her. Who took her for granted. She had sworn she wouldn't do it again. The final straw came 3 weeks later. Rachel had invited David to tour the nearly finished clinic. It was important to her. She wanted to share this milestone with him. David promised he would be there. Rachel waited at the clinic for 2 hours. Contractors asked if everything was okay. She smiled and said yes. But inside she was crumbling. When David finally called, he didn't even apologize. He just said something had come up at work. That he couldn't get away. That he would see the clinic another time.
Another time.
Her voice was cold.
Rachel, come on. You know how crazy things are right now.
I know you're making choices. And you're not choosing me.
That's not fair.
Isn't it?
There was silence on the line.
I think we need to take a break.
What? Rachel, no, but...
I can't keep doing this. Waiting for you to have time for me. Being the last priority on your list?
You're not the last priority.
Then what am I, David? Because it doesn't feel like I matter very much.
David's voice rose.
I'm trying to fix a company that my grandfather almost destroyed. 15,000 people depend on me. I'm sorry if I can't be perfect.
I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for present.
And I'm asking for understanding.
Rachel felt tears streaming down her face.
I understand more than you know. But understanding doesn't mean I have to accept being treated this way.
She hung up before he could respond. Then, she turned off her phone. She sat in the empty clinic and cried. The next few weeks were agony. David tried to call multiple times. He sent flowers. He showed up at her apartment. Rachel didn't respond. She threw herself into clinic preparations, hiring staff, ordering equipment, finalizing procedures. Work was her refuge. Jessica tried to get her to reconsider. She said David was clearly suffering. that he loved Rachel, that relationships required compromise.
I've compromised enough.
But at night, Rachel lay awake missing him, missing his laugh, missing the way he made her feel safe, missing the future they had been building together. She questioned her decision constantly. Was she being too harsh? Was she running away from something real? But then she remembered waiting alone at the restaurant, at the clinic, feeling invisible and unimportant. The clinic opened on a rainy Tuesday morning in October time. It was a small ceremony. Just staff and a few local officials. Margaret was there. Jessica was there. David was not. Rachel cut the ribbon with shaking hands. Cameras flashed. People applauded. It should have been the happiest moment of her life. Instead, she felt hollow. The first patient was an elderly woman with diabetes. She couldn't afford her medication. Rachel examined her personally, prescribed what she needed, sent her home with a month's supply free of charge. As the woman thanked her profusely, Rachel felt something shift. This was why she was here. This was Henry's legacy. This mattered more than her broken heart. The clinic thrived in its first month. They saw over 300 patients, people who had nowhere else to go. The staff worked long hours, but everyone was passionate. Rachel felt proud of what they had built. But she couldn't escape thoughts of David. She saw his face in every newspaper. He had become the public face of Sullivan Pharmaceuticals' reform efforts. He looked tired in every photo. Thinner. Older somehow. Then one evening, Rachel received an unexpected visitor. Thomas Harrington showed up at the clinic just before closing. He looked uncomfortable in the modest waiting room. Thomas asked to speak with Rachel privately. She led him to her small office. They sat on opposite sides of her desk. Thomas got straight to the point. He said David was falling apart. He worked constantly but made mistakes. He wasn't sleeping. He barely ate. The board was concerned about his health.
Why are you telling me this?
Thomas said because David refused to talk to anyone about it. But Thomas had seen the change. It started when Rachel and David broke up. David had lost his anchor. Thomas admitted he had been wrong. He had pushed David too hard, demanded too much. He had treated him like a tool instead of a person. Now, he was watching a good man destroy himself.
I can't fix him. That's not my job.
Thomas nodded. Thomas said he wasn't asking her to fix David. He was asking her to consider whether her pride was worth losing someone she loved. He stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. Thomas told her that David talked about her constantly, about her strength and her compassion, about how she had changed his life, about how he had ruined the best thing that ever happened to him. After Thomas left, Rachel sat in the dark office. Her mind was racing. Was it pride keeping her away? Or self-respect? Where was the line between protecting herself and punishing David? She thought about Henry, about his regret over pushing David away, about how he had died wishing for reconciliation. Was she making the same mistake? Jessica came by that evening to check on her. Rachel told her about Thomas's visit. Jessica listened without judgment. Jessica asked Rachel a simple question. Did she still love David? Rachel didn't hesitate.
Yes.
Jessica smiled gently. Jessica told her that love without boundaries wasn't love. It was doormat behavior. But love with impossible standards wasn't love either. It was punishment. Rachel needed to decide which she was doing. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She paced her apartment. She made lists of pros and cons. She called her mother's old number just to hear the voicemail. She needed guidance. Finally, at 3 a.m, she made a decision. She would talk to David. Not to get back together necessarily, but to have an honest conversation. To see if there was a path forward. The next morning, Rachel called David. He answered on the first ring. His voice was rough with surprise and hope.
Rachel.
Can we talk? In person?
Yes. When? Where?
The park where we scattered your grandfather's ashes. This afternoon.
I'll be there.
Rachel hung up. Her heart pounded. She had no idea what she would say, but she knew she had to try. They met under the oak tree at 2 o'clock. David was already there when Rachel arrived. He looked exactly as Thomas had described. Thin and exhausted. But his eyes lit up when he saw her. They stood facing each other awkwardly. Neither knew how to start. Finally, David spoke.
I'm sorry. For everything. For taking you for granted. For making you feel unimportant.
Rachel nodded. She had prepared a speech, but the words left her.
I'm sorry too. For shutting you out completely. For not trying to work through it.
You had every right to be angry.
Maybe. But I also ran away when things got hard. That's my pattern.
They sat down on the grass beneath the tree. For a while they just sat in silence, watching leaves fall around them.
I don't know how to do this.
Do what?
Balance loving you with protecting myself.
David took her hand. His fingers were cold.
I've done a lot of thinking. About what matters. About what my grandfather's life taught me.
He looked at their joined hands.
He built an empire, but died alone. He had all the success in the world, but no one who truly cared. Until you.
David's voice cracked.
I was becoming him. Choosing work over everything else. I don't want to die with that same regret.
What are you saying?
I'm saying I quit.
Rachel's eyes widened.
You what? What?
I resigned from the board. I'm stepping away from Sullivan Pharmaceuticals. Thomas will take full control.
David, that company is your legacy.
No. It was my grandfather's legacy. Mine is here with you. Building something that actually helps people.
Tears streamed down Rachel's face.
If you'll have me. If you can forgive me. I want to help with the clinic. I want to be your partner in every sense.
You don't have to give up everything for me.
I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing what matters.
Rachel threw her arms around him. They held each other tightly. Both crying. Both relieved.
I love you. Mwah.
I love you too. So much.
They stayed under that tree until sunset, talking about everything. About boundaries and needs. About compromise and partnership. About building a life together. It wouldn't be perfect. They both knew that. But they were willing to try. To fight for each other. To choose love over fear. David moved into Rachel's apartment the following week. It was small, but they made it work. He started volunteering at the clinic. He had no medical training, but he was good with people. He worked reception and helped with administrative tasks. Patients loved him. He remembered everyone's names. He joked with nervous children. He held hands with scared elderly patients. He found purpose in the simple act of helping. Rachel watched him transform. The stress lines around his eyes faded. He laughed more. He was present. Really present. 6 months after the clinic opened, they expanded. They added a dental clinic in the basement. Then a mental health wing. The trust Henry had left was being used exactly as he intended. On the anniversary of Henry's death, Rachel and David returned to the park. They brought flowers. They sat under the oak tree. They told Henry about everything that had happened.
I wish you could see the clinic. See what your gift became.
I think he knows.
David reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small box. Rachel's breath caught.
I had this made from my grandmother's ring. The one grandfather gave her at that county fair.
He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond. It was beautiful in its modesty.
Rachel, you changed my life. You showed me what really matters. You gave me purpose and hope.
He got down on one knee.
Will you marry me?
Rachel was crying and laughing at the same time.
Yes. Yes, of course, yes.
David slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood and kissed her. The world seemed to pause around them. They were married 3 months later, in a small ceremony. Jessica was the maid of honor. Margaret walked Rachel down the aisle. Thomas surprisingly showed up and congratulated them both. They honeymooned in Tuscany. It was David's first real vacation in 5 years. They spent 2 weeks exploring villages, eating incredible food, making love in the afternoon, planning their future. When they returned home, Rachel discovered she was pregnant. It was unexpected, but they were thrilled. David cried when she told him. He had never imagined being a father. But the pregnancy was difficult. Rachel developed complications in her second trimester. She was put on bed rest. David took over her duties at the clinic. Jessica and the other staff supported them completely. The clinic continued to thrive even without Rachel there daily. It proved they had built something sustainable. Their daughter was born on a snowy December night. After 20 hours of labor, she was tiny and perfect. They named her Hope, Margaret Sullivan. Hope, for the future Henry had made possible. Margaret for the woman who had guided them through it all. Sullivan to honor the complicated legacy they were transforming. David held his daughter with trembling hands. He looked at Rachel with pure wonder.
She's perfect.
She is?
Rachel watched David with their daughter. She thought about Henry, about how lonely he had been at the end, about how his final act of kindness had created this moment. 3 generations connected by love and loss, by second chances and redemption, by the simple truth that compassion changes everything. The clinic continued to grow over the next years. They added more services, hired more staff, opened a second location across town. David became the operations director. Rachel split her time between the clinic and raising Hope. She had never imagined this life was possible. Growing up poor with a single mother, struggling through nursing school, working endless shifts. Now she had everything she had ever wanted. Not the money, though, that helped, but the purpose, the love, the family. Hope grew into a curious, energetic toddler. She had David's blue eyes and Rachel's dark hair. She loved visiting the clinic. The patients doted on her. On Hope's 3rd birthday, they had a party at the clinic. The waiting room was decorated with balloons. Staff brought homemade treats. Patients who had become friends came to celebrate. Rachel looked around at the crowded room, at the laughter and joy, at the community they had built. She felt overwhelming gratitude. That evening, after Hope was in bed, David and Rachel sat on their balcony. They had bought a house the year before. Nothing ostentatious, but comfortable, with a yard for Hope to play in.
Do you ever think about how different things could have been?
All the time.
If you hadn't been working that night, if you had been assigned to a different patient,
We never would have met.
I would still be miserable and alone, working myself to death.
Rachel took his hand.
Your grandfather brought us together, in the strangest way possible. But I think he knew what he was doing.
You think so?
He saw something in me that reminded him of your grandmother. And he knew you needed someone like that. Someone to show you what really matters.
He was a smart man.
They sat in comfortable silence. Stars appeared in the darkening sky. Inside they could hear Hope's music box playing.
We should tell her about Henry when she's older. About how his kindness made all of this possible.
We will. We'll tell her about second chances. About how it's never too late to try to be better.
Even if you mess up along the way.
Especially if you mess up along the way.
Rachel leaned her head on David's shoulder. She thought about the scared, lonely nurse she had been. Working double shifts in a crumbling hospital. Eating instant noodles in a cold apartment. Dreaming of a clinic she thought would never exist. That woman felt like a stranger now. But Rachel carried her with respect. She had survived. She had kept her compassion even when life was hard. That was what Henry had recognized. That was what had changed everything. Years continued to pass. Hope started school. The clinic network expanded to 5 locations. They provided free healthcare to over 10,000 patients annually. Rachel was invited to speak at medical conferences, to share their model with other communities. She always told Henry's story, always emphasized that kindness was the foundation of everything. David found joy in the small moments. Coaching Hope's soccer team, volunteering at the clinic, growing vegetables in their backyard garden. He had traded empire building for a life of meaning. On what would have been Henry's 95th birthday, Rachel and David took Hope to the park. They had started this tradition when Hope was a baby. They sat under the oak tree. Hope played nearby.
Your great-grandfather was a complicated man. He made mistakes, but he tried to make things right at the end.
Hope looked up at them seriously. She was 6 now, and full of questions. Hope asked if great-grandfather Henry was in heaven. Rachel and David exchanged glances.
I think he's at peace, wherever he is.
Hope seemed satisfied with this answer. She went back to collecting acorns. Rachel watched her with a full heart. That night Rachel had trouble sleeping. She got up and went to her office. She pulled out a box she kept in her desk. Inside were Henry's letters to David. The ones David had shared with her years ago. She read through them slowly. Henry's handwriting shaky but determined. His words full of regret and hope. In the last letter he had written about Rachel. The letter said she had shown him that goodness still existed. That genuine kindness wasn't extinct. That he wasn't beyond redemption. He had written that he hoped David would find someone like Rachel. Someone who saw beyond money and status to the person underneath. Rachel wiped tears from her eyes. She carefully put the letters back. She would give them to Hope someday, when she was old enough to understand. Rachel returned to bed. David stirred and pulled her close.
You okay?
Perfect. Go back to sleep.
She lay in the dark listening to David breathe, thinking about how one choice had changed everything. She could have asked Jessica to take Henry's overnight shift. She could have done the minimum required. She could have kept her distance. But she had chosen compassion. And that choice had rippled outward, touching thousands of lives, creating a family, building a legacy. The clinic continued to thrive. Rachel and David grew old together. Hope went to medical school. She came back to work at the clinic network. The cycle continued. On Rachel's 70th birthday, the clinic threw a huge celebration. Hundreds of patients came. Staff, past and present. Community leaders. The mayor gave a speech. But the moment Rachel treasured most was quiet. Hope and her own children. Henry's great-great-grandchildren. Sitting with Rachel and David. Listening to stories about how it all began. Rachel told them about a lonely old man in a hospital bed. About holding his hand in the dark. About small acts of kindness that changed the world. She told them that money didn't bring Henry happiness. But giving it away, at the end, brought him peace. She told them that love was more valuable than any fortune. That family was everything. That it was never too late for redemption. The children listened, with wide eyes. They asked questions. Rachel and David answered patiently, passing down the lessons they had learned. That night, Rachel stood in the clinic that bore Henry's name. She walked through the quiet halls, past examination rooms where lives were saved daily, past the memorial wall, with Henry's photo, past the lobby where David had proposed all those years ago. She thought about the journey, about loss and love, about broken people finding wholeness, about legacies built on compassion. Rachel knew she was one of the lucky ones. Not because of money, but because she had learned the secret, that giving yourself to others was the only path to real happiness, that human connection was the only thing that truly mattered. She turned off the lights and locked the door. David was waiting in the car. They drove home through the quiet city, their hands linked across the console. Two people who had found each other through grief, who had built something beautiful from loss, who had honored a complicated man's final wish, who had created a love story for the ages. It had started with a dying patient in a hospital bed, with a tired nurse who chose kindness, with 5 days that changed 3 lives forever. And it had become so much more, a testament to the power of compassion, a reminder that we all deserve grace, a proof that love can bloom in the darkest places, a legacy that would outlive them all. How did you enjoy today's story? Please leave a rating from 1 to 10. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you have a similar experience or personal story, feel free to share it in the comments. Your engagement greatly helps the growth and longevity of this channel. If you subscribe, you'll receive new stories every day. We hope today's episode brought richness to your day. Thank you for watching.